thank you for being here today, and it really is an honor, one, to just be here and amongst my people who spend their days and hours and years and life trying to help people find those glimmers of hope to want to go forward one more day, or after their life has been decimated, to pick themselves back up and try again. Hi, Ray. It really is a privilege. And then two, I get to walk in and see so many people I know. It's been like a little mini high school reunion, and I refuse to go to my high school reunion because, let's be honest, I was a parking lot kid. I was getting high and doing all those other things during high school. It's a miracle I graduated. So I am a person in long-term recovery, and celebrated 11 years clean and sober this year. And that's a gift. I love that cute Heidi had her mom and dad here supporting her today, because as a single mom, we need all the support we can get. And that's how my journey began with kids. I could never figure out the commitment. So when people used to say committed, I'd be like, what's that? To a man, right? I knew how to be committed to myself and my children. But it took me a long time to figure out the husband thing. Thankfully, I married a person who's also in long-term recovery. He celebrated 13 years, and, thank God, thank God that there is hope, and thank God that we do recover, and the lie is dead. So today, I came from the beginnings of suicide prevention, not because I wanted to be a suicide prevention advocate. I got forced into that role, as many of us do, right? When life gives you that experience that you say, okay, I can either let this experience decimate me, and boy did it, or I can take it and do something with it. My dad did die by suicide 23 years ago. That's unreal to think about. I was 26, so I'm starting to get to that where I've had more of my life without him than with him. And I've dedicated those last 2 decades to really educating our communities about suicide. Because we, like most families, when you have these kinds of deaths, have people say really awesome things. Like, what a coward. How selfish. I can't believe he did that to you. My favorite. Oh, he's in hell. That's a sin. Cool. Thanks. And I remember back then as a 26-year-old, being filled with rage when these comments would be said, but knowing I couldn't throat punch them, because then again, I would be assaulted, and I would be, our friends back here in the blue would be taking me away. I've been to your jail, I don't like the baloney, I wasn't about to go back, okay? And so I knew I had 2 choices. I could shame them, right? How dare you? That is so wrong, and this is why, and right? And trust me, I wanted to do that. There may have been a bishop or 2 that I did. Or I could educate them. My favorite experience of trying to educate a really, really ignorant person, and remember, ignorance just simply means uninformed. Brandon talked to you about it. A lot of our legislators are ignorant, meaning they just don't know some of the issues because they haven't experienced them yet. In today's world, there's no reason to remain ignorant, man. Information is everywhere. But we were marching in a pride parade up in Salt Lake City. And this was in those days when the Westboro Baptists would fly in with all their fun, religion-filled, hate-filled signs and scream really awful things to you as you walked past. I can't even repeat them, they were so awful. And I remember walking past this gentleman as he screamed in my face, why don't you go effing kill yourself? And I was like, right? Rage, arm, and went, no. I have this little sign that says, keep fighting. And there was a trans woman standing next to him. And her sign did say, F this guy, so I had to give her a hug. And as I walked up to him, I just said, sir, Do you realize how many people are thinking that right now? And that today, at the time, it was like 42 people in our, will make an attempt and die by suicide today. Do you understand why that comment is hurtful? Like, I'm trying to educate this mofo. And of course, he just yells with his bullhorn back in my face. Caution, I'm going to say a little swear word. Plug your ears if that offends. But what I said to him, because again, I'd given it my best, and I just finally looked at him in all sternness and said, well, at least my Jesus isn't an asshole. That was the best I could come up with, okay? Best I could come up with. Because again, the God I believe in loves everyone. And y'all, that's really why, I had to kind of step away in a lot of aspects from suicide prevention, because our world is making it really difficult right now to prevent suicide among some of our most vulnerable populations. And we got to work together to make sure that people know that they have value and meaning, and they deserve to be here. So I came to you today to share with you grief literacy. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, it's where I work, kind of my job. But two, life would be life and give me an experience that reminded me how, again, uninformed, that's what literacy means, right, is that we're informed, how uninformed our communities are as it relates to grief. Raise your hand if you've ever experienced grief. Remember, this is any kind of loss, family, relationship, friend, person we love, person we didn't care for, right, pets, all the things. It is the most universal experience we as humans can have. But we don't talk about it. Anderson Cooper does this podcast where he's now addressing the years of grief that he's dealt with, having lost a brother to suicide. His dad died when he was young. His mom, Gloria Vanderbilt, just passed away. And he interviewed Andrew Garfield, who's one of my favorite actors, and he gave this most beautiful analogy. He says, again, we've all been impacted, yet we're not at work saying, hey, tell me about your grandma, and tell me about your person, and man, what did they like to do? And, we should be doing that. We should be having those conversations, and we're just not. And that resonated with me. How many bereavement days do we get when we lose somebody? 3. 3 whole days, woo, because that's when it's over. That's when you're over it, right? No. So, Manny mentioned October. October 5th is when my dad died by suicide in 2002. On October 5th of 2023, my beautiful mother, who'd been battling multiple myeloma and kidney failure for 18 years, went into kidney failure. Now, she had said for years, I'm not doing dialysis. She started chemo, quit chemo, because she said, I don't want to be sick. I want to live the days I have remaining on this earth, feeling as good as I can feel, and getting the most out of them. And I respected that. In fact, when she said she wanted to quit chemo, I bought her a shirt that said, I'll decide. Because she was so worried about offending her doctor when she went and said, I'm done. Right, I'm done. And so when her kidneys failed, we had to take her in, and she said, no, I think I'll try dialysis. Now that I'm faced with my mortality, I'm not quite sure I want to leave yet. And of course, the day being October 5th, they had to do a surgery, and because again, kidneys are kaput, she may not wake up, but if she does, she'll die anyway, so we got to do this. And she looks at me, she goes, don't worry, I won't die. I wouldn't do that to you kids. I won't die on the same day your dad did. And you guys, that is my mother to a T. And she made it 13 more days. On October 18th, she took her last breath, and I got to be present. I was her caregiver. I gave her morphine. I kept her comfortable. And I go to that Steel Magnolias movie. It was the most precious moment of my life to see the woman who gave birth to me, who took care of me, let me take care of her as she left this world. What a gift, right? What a gift. And then the world became the world. And a week after, it was, okay, get back to it, right? Make sure you're doing your job. Get back to it. Go on, move on, move on, move on. And what I recognized is, we just got work to do. You're here today because we're talking about suicide prevention and substance use. 2 forms of death that people are dying from daily in our state and in our country. And yet we don't necessarily know how to show up for people in ways that are helpful and healing. My terrible joke I always make is after Dad died, nobody showed up with the creepy green Jell-O and the carrots in it. Thank God. Mormons, you make some weird food. I grew up Mormon, I know, I used to eat that crap. But again, it wasn't because they didn't care, right? Why didn't they come? They didn't know what to say, right? It's uncomfortable, it's awkward, and they're like, ah. Now people did come after Mom, but we sadly had to also put a note on the door that said, thoughts and prayers welcome, food and visitors, no thanks, we don't want you here. Because we just didn't need it at that time. And so what I'm going to take you through today is I want to share with you some information about how we can really become a more grief-literate community. What does that mean? What does it look like? How can we show up for people who are grieving in ways that are helpful, not hurtful? Especially this disenfranchised grief that we'll talk about that occurs when people have lost a loved one to suicide or an overdose. And I know Heidi made you do it earlier, but I'll invite you to again. If that's been your experience, raise your hand. And how many of you remember trying to navigate the what do we say? Do we tell people? And I'm so thrilled these days when I read the obituaries, which I do, I'm a weirdo, when people are honest about their loved one's cause of death and they say they lost their battle to a 13-year fight with addiction, or they, succumbed to suicide, or depression killed them. Like, thank you. That's how we stop this, is we talk about it. I know it's Utah, we don't like to say the S words, but you gotta say them all. Suicide, sex, and education. Because if we don't talk about them, we don't give people answers for what they can do to get help and get better, okay? So back in 2018, a group of scientists and grief counselors and workers across the world gathered in Ontario, Canada. And they sat down and they said, we want to create those conversations, and we're just not. And that resonated with me. How many bereavement days do we get when we lose somebody? 3. 3 whole days, woo, because that's when it's over. That's when you're over it, right? No. So, Manny mentioned October 5th is when my dad died by suicide in 2002. On October 5th of 2023, my beautiful mother, who'd been battling multiple myeloma and kidney failure for 18 years, went into kidney failure. Now, she had said for years, I'm not doing dialysis. She started chemo, quit chemo, because she said, I don't want to be sick. I want to live the days I have remaining on this earth, feeling as good as I can feel and getting the most out of them. And I respected that. In fact, when she said she wanted to quit chemo, I bought her a shirt that said, I'll decide, because she was so worried about offending her doctor when she went and said, I'm done. Right, I'm done. And so when her kidneys failed, we had to take her in, and she said, no, I think I'll try dialysis. Now that I'm faced with my mortality, I'm not quite sure I want to leave yet. And of course, the day being October 5th, they had to do a surgery, and because again, kidneys are kaput, she may not wake up, but if she does, she'll die anyway, so we got to do this. And she looks at me, she goes, don't worry, I won't die. I wouldn't do that to you kids. I won't die on the same day your dad did. And you guys, that is my mother to a T. And she made it 13 more days. On October 18th, she took her last breath. And I got to be present. I was her caregiver. I gave her morphine. I kept her comfortable. And I go to that Steel Magnolias movie. It was the most precious moment of my life. to see the woman who gave birth to me, who took care of me, let me take care of her as she left this world. What a gift, right? What a gift. And then the world became the world. And a week after, it was, okay, get back to it, right? Make sure you're doing your job. Get back to it. Go on, move on, move on, move on. And what I recognized is, we just got work to do. You're here today because we're talking about suicide prevention and substance use. 2 forms of death that people are dying from daily in our state and in our country. And yet we don't necessarily know how to show up for people in ways that are helpful and healing. My terrible joke I always make is after Dad died, nobody showed up with the creepy green Jell-O and the carrots in it. Thank God. Mormons, you make some weird food. I grew up Mormon. I know. I used to eat that crap. But again, it wasn't because they didn't care, right? Why didn't they come? They didn't know what to say, right? It's uncomfortable. It's awkward. And they're like, ah. Now, people did come after Mom. But we sadly had to also put a note on the door that said, thoughts and prayers welcome, food and visitors, no thanks. We don't want you here. Because we just didn't need it at that time. And so what I'm going to take you through today is I want to share with you some information about how we can really become a more grief literate community. What does that mean? What does it look like? How can we show up for people who are grieving in ways that are helpful, not hurtful? Especially this disenfranchised grief that we'll talk about that occurs when people have lost a loved one to suicide or an overdose. And I know Heidi made you do it earlier, but I'll invite you to again. If that's been your experience, raise your hand. And how many of you remember trying to navigate the what do we say? Do we tell people? And I'm so thrilled these days when I read the obituaries, which I do, I'm a weirdo, when people are honest about their loved one's cause of death and they say they lost their battle to a 13-year fight with addiction, or they, succumbed to suicide, or depression killed them. Like, thank you. That's how we stop this, is we talk about it. I know it's Utah. We don't like to say the S words, but you got to say them all. Suicide, sex, and addiction. Because if we don't talk about them, we don't give people answers for what they can do to get help and get better, okay? So back in 2018, a group of scientists and grief counselors and workers across the world gathered in Ontario, Canada. And they sat down and they said, we want to create this. They know they need a little bit more help to be able to navigate this and move forward. Now, most of us, will do just fine with either a group like Caring Connections, peer support groups. Where's my USARA friends? I saw your table. Yeah! USARA is one of my favorite groups in our recovery community because, again, you are recovery support advocates. You have that lived experience. And we know that when I sit down with somebody else who's walked my walk and been where I've been, 1, I'm more willing to be honest with you, and 2, I don't feel alone. Right? How many of you have ever sat in a peer support group and all of a sudden you're just like, me too, me too, me too. That's how I felt with my sponsor when I did my 5th step. I was terrified, and then that woman just sat there going, me too, me too. Even when I got to my sex inventory and I was terrified to tell her the number. Me too, phew. I used to lie to the doctor, how many sexual partners should you have? I'm like, and he'd give me a range, and I'm like, yeah, let's go with that one. That one sounds good, right? So I embarrassed myself too much right there. Peer support is where it's at. We know that that is so helpful for a lot of people, but some might need more. But again, the bulk of people, look at that, almost 60% do just fine grieving in our communities if they have supportive friends, family members, and somebody who will just listen. So we want to increase that. I love this slide. Who remembers learning the Stages of Grief by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross? She is the first to tell you that those things were not meant to be linear. It is not a checklist. You don't go through anger and rage and guilt and this and, it is this. It is all over the place. Come on, grievers, how many of you have been pissed off and crying in the same 2 moments? Laughter through tears is my favorite emotion. I'm going to quote Still Magnolias this whole presentation, so get over it. It's the best movie ever, and there's a Still Magnolias quote for everything, okay? But we know that it's all over the place. And interestingly enough, I sat in a long-term survivor summit a couple years ago that AFSP put on, and I got to hear from David Kessler. Now, mind you, he is a gentleman that worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on creating these stages of grief. He was what's considered a grief therapist, an expert in this field. And he said, in front of all of us, you know, I used to tell people when they'd come into me that were grieving, just hold on, it'll get better. And then his son died of a heroin overdose. And he said, I want to go back to every single one of those families I sat with and tell them, I am so sorry because I was wrong. It doesn't get better. It gets different. Who can relate to that? It doesn't get better, it gets different. There ain't a day go by I don't think about my mom and dad. They're here. I know they're here. I keep getting chills up my legs, and that's Jill going, eh. And then Dad will give me a little, if I say something too inappropriate. You know, I know how that goes. He used to call me Trucker T. He hated that I had a foul mouth. That's half the reason I swear to him. I'm like, well, you left, bud. Suck it up. Taryn's gonna swear, right? But I have to tell you something interesting about that. In the 22 years since Dad had died by suicide, I was never angry at him. I understood, because I had also been in that dark night of the soul. I know what it feels like to be in that place where you think you can't do it one more damn minute, and you don't want to. Thankfully, all my attempts, would have been the failed. No, we don't say that. We don't say that. I just had suicide attempts. But thank God I was never good at it. And I remember a therapist actually saying that to me as a teenager. He was like, what you did wouldn't have killed you. I'm like, shouldn't we be glad about that? Like, we should probably be glad that I didn't know what I was doing, you dummy. But that's what he said. But I'm here to tell you that when my mom died, oh, did the anger come. And it's still here. For a year and a half, I have been pissed. So glad you came back. Stay. And I know you've got good little friends here who are going to love on you, and I'm going to hug the shit out of you after. If you'll let me. I'll ask permission, because consent matters. But I've been mad. And again, here's what I know. My dad can take that anger. He gets it. It's okay. I don't feel guilty about that. Now, a lot of grievers, we get mad, and then we're like, gosh, I feel bad that I feel guilty that I'm mad. No, be mad. And then you go to therapy, and they're like, okay, here's how this is going to work. We're going to go through these you're going to bargain. You're going to get to a place of acceptance. No, this is grief. Dude, you're like a ping pong ball all over the place, right? Remember those little games we used to play as kids? What do they call that with the little things on the side? Pinball, thank you. God, I get ping ball. Thinking of ping pong. You're with me, thank you. But that's it. And what we want to help people to do is to take that unimaginable, unbearable, big, heavy weight that grief is and just make it a little easier to carry. And we can. We can. So who needs grief support when loss happens? We can't hear a heartbeat. It appears that the baby has died. We will need to induce labor for you to deliver the baby. Hi, Dad. We just had the police come to let us know that Tom is dead. It looks like it was an overdose. I took care of her for the past 10 years of dementia. How can I live without her? What am I going to do? Why did my brother kill himself? He had so much to live for. And what will I ever do without my dad? How many of you have heard these stories, met these people, been these people? And you know, the hard part about all of this is these are real situations that we encounter day in and day out. So when we talk to grievers, and I actually do love that that's where I get to spend my days. People tease me, they're like, you left suicide prevention to do grief and you thought that would be lighter? No, I didn't. I'm not insane, well, slightly. But I did it because it is seriously the most sacred and humble space you can to be with a person that is in that brokenness of, I don't know what to do next. Remember that quote we always hear too, that grief is the price we pay for love? Yeah. And when you've loved big, grief is big. So what do these people tell us, right? What do they tell us that they need or what they've heard? And here's some. The baby probably had something wrong with it. You're lucky you're young. You can still have another baby. Where's my miscarriages in here? Come on, pregnancy and infant loss, raise them high. Y'all, we need to do better by mothers who experience pregnancy loss. In fact, guess what? We're starting a group again. We haven't had it since COVID. We still have spots available if you know women who are still struggling with the grief of having lost a baby. Any stage. Send them our way. Well, at least you won't have to keep paying for treatment. The world has enough addicts. These are all real terms we've heard, y'all, from our grievers. Well, you must be relieved. She's out of her suffering. Now you have time to do things for yourself. Here's my favorite when it's a suicide death. How did they do it? Come on, where's my suicide loss, folks? We love when people ask us that conversation. None your business! And we don't talk about the method because guess what? That's dangerous. That's where people get the idea who are already struggling. Not someone who's never considered it. Someone who's already there and exposed to graphic details. That increases risk. Now you need to be a big girl for your mom. Sibling loss. Where are my people at who've lost a sibling? Raise your hands. Sibling loss is one of the most ignored forms of grief. And again, I can tell you that from having witnessed so many siblings lose brothers and sisters. And you guys, in my work, just in those 2 decades with AFSP, I worked with 6 families who lost multiple children to suicide. All boys. All boys. And here's my thoughts on why. When a child loses their sibling, especially to something like suicide, but this is true for any form of death, cancer, car accident, doesn't matter. They're devastated too, right? Right. Mom and dad, devastated. Yep. But oftentimes we hear that statement. I've heard it be said to kids, okay, now you be a real good girl. You be really strong for mom and dad. Well, who the hell's showing up for that kid? Who's letting that kid grieve? Because I promise you, those kids that went on to then die by suicide wish they could have told mom and dad how sad and distraught they were, but they didn't dare because they see how devastated they are. So of course I'm not going to bring that to you when I'm in the depths of it myself. You see where I'm going? So we need to start getting to kids and younger people sooner. And even those of us who are in our older years that have lost siblings. How many of you lost somebody before you were age 12? Okay, we're going to talk about that today. We finally have this new grief support manual in conjunction with USBE from money that was funded through the legislature. Yay! We're taking it while we got it before they change their minds. But you guys, we created a teen grief support model. So the trainings are getting filmed and finalized so that we can train, again, people in our communities to hold grief groups for kids because we need it. And I'll talk more about that in a minute, so I won't steal my thunder there. So grief, the reason this is so hard is number one, it's a reminder about death. It's a reminder that nothing is permanent, and at any time things can change. My stepson, who's going to be he is a senior, he's graduating this year, he's experienced 5 deaths in just the last year. Both of his great-grandmas, his aunt to a drug overdose, his uncle to a suicide, and then another grandma. 5! He's not even 18. So you better believe this created a lot of anxiety to him. He's like, people are dying, right? It reminds us that this can happen. Yeah, it's awkward. Because when you're doing that ugly cry, and I know hopefully lots of you have done it where the snot and everything's coming because you don't give it, right? It's coming out. Yeah, that's awkward for people to see. I remember after my dad killed himself, I worked at JCPenney. I was the jewelry manager. For that entire first year, tears literally just streamed out of my eyes. Like, I'm not sobbing, but my eyes literally leaked for an entire year. Because I just couldn't believe what had just happened, right? Plus, I found him. I had all those other fun little traumas that come with stuff like that. So yeah, it can be awkward. It can be scary. It can be scary to be with somebody who's that emotional and sad and upset and struggling, because can we fix it? No. No. Where's my fixers in the room? You good codependents? Hit me up at an Al-Anon meeting. That's where I hang out, trying to learn that I ain't got control over anybody else. Dang it! Because if you just did things my way, we'd all be set, right? It's uncomfortable. And it's vulnerable. I love people who grieve out loud. But I promise you, the people that come to our grief groups, most of them are telling us, this is the only place I feel like I can open up and just be me. I save it. I sit through work. No tears have fallen. And if anybody asks me, right, you almost want people not to ask you because you're like, don't do it, don't do it. Those floodgates are going to open, don't do it, right? Do it. God, do it. We got to be okay with the uncomfortableness. Again, we've all been there. This is something we can support people through, so let that stuff come. So we're going to talk for a little bit about what grievers experience and kind of the emotions they go through, okay? Now, this is really more true for sudden and unexpected deaths. This could be a car accident, heart attack, something that, again, is really out of the blue, but this also holds true for suicide death that maybe people didn't see. In fact, just a few weeks ago, my uncle took his life. And again, a big shout out to my good friend Brandon here, who also works at the OME, who I got to call and just say, take care of his body. It will do my aunt good to know that somebody I know is taking care of his body, right? But they didn't see it coming. No indications. Suicide prevention, we talk all the time that there's usually warning signs. Again, usually, not always. Because sometimes it's that situational. We see this in teens. This is where that impulsivity comes in, right? The breakup, the speeding ticket, the coppers taking me to jail for getting high in my mom's bedroom using her bong. Oh, that was my kid. Cool. Oops. Still remember when you all raided my house. I had to warn you about some other things you might find in my bedroom, and thanks for leaving that out on the dresser for me. I appreciate you so much. You guys, we gotta laugh. This is heavy stuff, so I'm trying to bring a little levity. Just go with it. But you guys, shock is a natural part of grief. And honestly, it's our brain's response that we need. Because if we didn't get that little bit of psychological amnesia, this could be too much for some people to survive. Remember those moments. Remember how it felt. I'm sure all of you that have lost someone can tell you exactly, again, where I was, what I was doing, when I got the news, or when I experienced that. It changes us forever. You look at your life as everything before that day and then the person you are after that day. And we're going to talk about that later too. However, sadly, with our folks who lose people to substance use or suicide, many of them, it was a day they knew was coming. I always say this, my dad, we knew he was going to kill himself. He'd attempted so many times, we didn't know what to do. I remember his last attempt that he was hospitalized after a firearm injury, and they just sent him home. Like, we didn't even get like, hey, your dad just tried to kill himself, here's what you maybe should do. Like, none of that was available back then. Nobody talked about it. So we knew it was coming, we just didn't know how to stop it. And then you better believe, after watching him battle addiction and job loss and losing everything, man, I was so relieved that day. Because I thought, finally, I don't have to worry about when that call's going to come because it's here. Loved ones who struggle with addiction, we've felt that for our people we care for too, haven't we? Those of us who've been in that addicted place, we know that that's how our loved ones felt for us, going, gosh, I don't want to get that call. And then we feel guilty for feeling relieved. No, we feel relieved. See where I'm going? So let's talk about guilt. How many of you have done that guilt game? The coulda, shoulda, woulda. And this is, again, you guys, a natural response of our brain. Our brain is trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. Why? That's the question. It's trying to answer. Well, maybe if I had done this, or if I hadn't said that, or if I had gone here, right, they would still be here. And again, sadly, we're not God. We don't have that kind of influence and power over people. You know, Heidi alluded to it, and I believe it strongly, that again, the people who are struggling with depression and anxiety and who are having thoughts and feelings of suicide, who are in that freaking hole and depth of despair from drug addiction or alcoholism, like, yeah, we have to want to fight too. You can't fight for us. You can't save us if we're not willing to put some skin in the game. And that's a hard reality, isn't it? Because then that's also where you have to sometimes take a step back and take care of yourself and then watch the train wreck happen. So what I've learned to do with my guilt is I don't use it as the shame stick anymore, right? That doesn't do anybody any good. I look for ways to be helpful to other people who can still be helped today. That's how I honor my dad. That's how I honor my sister-in-law who died of a drug overdose. She sent me to the ruins of Al-Anon, man. I was trying so hard to save her from herself when it wasn't my job. When it wasn't my job. We also get this part that somehow, right, something we did, we talked about this one. Where we have to watch guilt, though, is if it translates into shame. Remember, Brene Brown has done a ton of work on this. Guilt is that feeling of like, gosh, I did something wrong. But shame is where we start to say, I am wrong, right? We personalize it. Again, we deal with a lot of this, y'all, in grief work. And it's an important balance. People who feel guilt, that can still be a motivator, right? If I feel guilty, sometimes that makes me change my behavior. But shame takes it to a whole new level where I start to get stuck in some of those spaces. This is a common experience we feel. We actually took to KSL. Shelley Osterloh, who remembers Shelley Osterloh, an anchor years ago on KSL? Yeah, bringing it back. So she did this story on my dad. She called it the Diary of Pain. Seriously? You know, news stations, they gotta get you to pay attention. Because my dad had journaled about his feelings. We shared those with her. He'd saved all his receipts from all those prescriptions he was getting refilled every day because he paid for that crap in cash. So he wrote it off on his taxes. He no dummy. So we had all that, right? Sorry, our family's responsible for why the DOPL now actually checks who's getting prescriptions. Because we took my dad's doctor to court. Because he did. He recklessly prescribed OxyContin with a refill. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? But again, this is 2002. This is when we had no idea the dangers that the opioid epidemic would see, and why we have the opioid settlement money from Purdue Pharma that we do today. But this is normal for us. We want something to be the cause. Some of us are mad at our people. We're mad at the system. We're mad at the school. We're mad at the treatment center. Come on, how many of you have worked in a space where you've had a client die by suicide and you're like, great, here it comes. Here's all that anger going to be that I failed, I did something wrong. That's a natural part. We try to invite people to, again, give grace to the people who cared for your loved one, but also give grace to yourself, right? This is a big one. Anxiety and fear creep up. How many of you remember when your person had that worst possible case scenario happened, you went on hyper alert, right? My daughter still to this day has to track my location. She gotta know where I'm at. I'm in Price, Caitlin, I'll see you soon. Because she needed to know. Mom used to not show up. I wouldn't know where she is. Now I know where she is today because I can track her location. There is absolutely a fear that it will happen again. My good friend Brandon can tell you, I can tell you, suicide runs in families. We see it. You know, we see it happen time and time again. The hardest conversation I had to have with my aunt and my cousins a couple weeks ago is they said, Taryn, what does this do to the risk for our kids? And I said, oh, it just went up tenfold. So you better start talking about it. You better start talking about it. Because it can, if we leave it unaddressed, right? But then there's these feelings of, you know, what's ahead? Do I even want what's ahead? This hypervigilance we go into, the being suspicious of other people. These are all experiences grievers have. We talked about this one a little bit, but again, a very real part of grief is being angry. But it's important we figure out who we're angry at and how we channel that anger. We allow grievers to be angry. You get to. You don't get to be destructive, right? This is where we can use things like mindfulness, and we try to help people get back into their bodies, but it's okay to be mad. I do mindfulness with my little twins who are 3 grandbabies, so effing cute, but they fight like cats and dogs. And Bear will say to me, I'll be like, okay, Bear, deep breath. I'm not do deep breath, Grandma. I'm not do deep breath. I'm mad. And I'm like, okay. But I mean, I'm learning that I just gotta let him be. It's okay for him to be mad for a minute too, right? What we have to watch for, though, is when people start to isolate and pull away. And again, this is very common. We don't come out in the community because we already are worried about how we're going to look, how we're going to feel, if the tears are going to come, how you're going to perceive me, what are you going to say to me, what are you going to do? So I may as well just stay home, right? But isolation is dangerous for grievers. Now we see this a lot in our loss of spouse groups. Oh, that one just breaks my soul. Because you have these people who have lived with a person for more than half their life and they just don't know what to do now. And it doesn't matter gender. I see this in common as in women as I do in men, right? It's devastating. And so we need to be mindful that when we see people pull into those spaces, what can we do to help draw them out? So I'm going to just talk briefly about these kind of 2 really important kinds of loss that we deal with grievers. The first one is ambiguous, and the second is disenfranchised. You guys heard those terms before? So ambiguous loss is something that we're working a lot with right now. This is where, again, I don't have answers, right? I maybe don't know the full story. There's some ambiguity around what's happened. So it's a loss that really doesn't have any kind of closure. Where are my Dateline people in the room? Who else watches Murder to Decompress? Yes! Me too. Every Friday night, religiously, I'm on my couch, keep Wars and bring it. That's how I decompress. I know it's probably not healthy. Don't judge me. I don't care. I'm doing it. But how many stories are there families on there whose loved one has disappeared? There is no closure because the body is never found. The killer is never brought to justice. See where I'm going? Like that is an absence that people feel. And when we say this loss can be physical or psychological, meaning they know the person is gone because their physical body is gone, but maybe the brain can't wrap its mind around the fact that it's happened. Or it's the opposite. No bodies, no answers. My brain is trying to figure that out. Who in here has cared for a loved one with a dementia diagnosis? So we've been engaged in this pre-loss support group for dementia caregivers. We created this model that implements prolonged grief group therapy because we know that dementia caregivers have a higher likelihood of developing complicated grief. So our director, Kathy Supiano, says, why are we waiting till their person dies to get them grief support now? Because dementia is defined as the long goodbye. So it has ambiguity because your person is physically here, but mentally they're not, right? We see this sometimes with substance use. Again, your person is physically here, but you don't know where they are. You haven't heard from them. That relationship has been fractured, right? So there's a lot of these things that we have to take into consideration. And Pauline Moss out of the University of Minnesota has done a ton of work to really help us understand these. And so that's the way it's broken down. Type 1, again, is that kidnapped, they were missing, lost without a trace. I love that it has this. Remember, people don't have to be dead for us to grieve. How many of you have sent your kids away to college? Where's my military spouses in the room who've sent someone on a deployment, right? You can have that same loss and grief experience even with people who are living. And then last is that psychological absence, but they're physically here. And again, it's important we understand, what people are dealing with. This is why we go to the blame and shame, because we're trying to make sense of a situation that just doesn't make sense. And there is nothing more difficult than working with a grieving person who will never have closure. Because they have to learn to live with the, I'm never gonna know. How many of you is that like just absolutely takes your brain to a place where you go, I don't know that I could do that, because I gotta know everything, right? Gives me such empathy, I can't imagine never knowing the answer. And for most of us who've lost a loved one to suicide, we'll never know the full story, right? We've done the psychological autopsies, Brandon does those at our OME. We do interviews with family, Ed's participated in those. We ask all the questions because we're trying to figure out what could we have done, what was missed, right? But do we really know the 100% reason? No. Who knows that? The person who's gone. Y'all, this is why we invite you with lived experience who have attempted and thought of suicide to talk to us, because you can inform our efforts. You get to tell us what was happening, what sucked about your treatment, right? What you needed that you didn't get. Like, we need your voice to inform what we're gonna do differently. Do you see where I'm going? So that's helpful to us. But helping people navigate that situation, if you're just maybe not gonna have the answers, is really tough. So how does that loss compare to this loss? So disenfranchised grief. These are the griefs that aren't socially endorsed by our communities. And those two deaths are suicide and overdose. And we've even changed our overdose death to be lost substance use. Because my last group that I ran, and I'm starting another one, ooh, I'm glad my brain remembered. I have another loss to substance use group starting next week. I still need more people. If you have anybody that's grieving a loss to a alcohol death, overdose death, whatever, send them my way, please. We would love a few more people so we can run the group. You can't have a group of 2 people. I mean, you can, but it would be weird. Send them my way. Karen Connections, I'll give you my details at the end. But we changed it to substance use for this reason. I was running a group a couple months back, and again, you're gonna hear from Dr. Staley and Megan tomorrow. Megan's going to give you the nitty-gritty of overdose deaths in the state. What's the #1 cause of overdose deaths? What drug? Yeah. And out of the 8 participants I had in that group, all of them, with the exception of 1, were fentanyl. Again, shout out to naloxone out there. Shout out to Jen Plum, who's done so much work at making fentanyl test strips and things. Harm reduction is needed. Of course, we don't want people to use, but safe needle exchange and all those things are needed. Let's try to do something to help them get a chance to find recovery. But the one gal who didn't have a fentanyl overdose, her son had drank himself to death. And if you know individuals who died an alcoholic death, it is brutal. It is just brutal. And I remember, she was pretty quiet after we did our introductions, that first group. And when we came back the next week, the first thing she said, I wasn't sure I was going to come again. I said, why not? I didn't think I fit. Because my son didn't do what these other kids had done. She said, but, this is what I love, I heard from other mothers and I realized it didn't matter what the drug was. We're mothers who were grieving our kids, and there were 4 other moms in there grieving their kids. And she said, and that's why I'm back. I went, oh, thank God, right? I was so relieved, because she would have missed out on such a beautiful opportunity had she only looked for the similarities. And y'all, how often do we do that? Come on, those of us in recovery, we know this to be a fact. I mean, I used to gauge my recovery based on intervention. I'd be like, well, I'm not that bad. I still have most of my teeth. I haven't drank hand sanitizer yet, right? Like, that's how I would gauge how good I was doing. And, because I didn't think I was you. And then I realized real quick, yes, I am. I'm you because I'm a human, you're a human, you're a human, you're a human, and we're all just here having these human experiences trying to figure it out. And man, do we need each other. So that's why it's important for us to recognize that these kind of losses just have unique circumstances, and we just need to be mindful when we're encountering people who are grieving that they might have that disenfranchisement, which means they don't want to open up, they don't feel comfortable saying, this is how my person died, because they're afraid of the judgment that's going to come, right? So again, you sharing your experiences, you opening up about your losses, empowers others to do the same, okay? And then this last one, we know that ambiguous loss creates a lot of risk for complicated grief, like we talked. But again, it's not them that is the problem. I'm going to say that again. It's not the person that is the problem. It's the factors around it, okay? Again, the not knowing, the not having understanding, and then maybe. Like I did a grief inventory with this gal the other day who'd had 13 losses again in the last 6 years. And big ones. I'm talking family. She's literally the only member of her family left. That's a complicated story that's going to, again, increase her risk. Does it mean she's going to have a prolonged grief disorder? No. But why do we even talk about risk? So we know what to do too. Where's my prevention, folks? Prevent it, right? We know that grief is ongoing, okay? It's going to happen. But what we want to help people to do is learn how to integrate that grief into their experience, into their life, so they can move forward. And one of the groups we see this with the most who struggles, dun, 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 teens. Okay, teens. So that's what we're going to talk about for a minute. Water and Pedialyte saved me all week. I think I got food poisoning Monday night. It was terrible. So I was going to warn Brandon, if I have to do an exit stage left, get up here, but I don't. I'm doing good. All right, so here's what we know. Welcome. Come again. So we know that by the end of high school, 5% of students in the U.S. will have lost one of their parents to death, and 20% will have experienced the death of someone close to them by age 18. Again, in our world today, how many of us have seen kids left by things like the fentanyl overdoses, the opioid epidemic, suicides, where grandmas and grandpas are now the caregiver for some of these young people because the availability and accessibility to some of these things. We are seeing grief experiences happen much younger. And it isn't just suicide and overdose, it's cancers, right? It's car accidents. We all watch the news. We shouldn't, but we do. Gluttons for punishment, right? And you see some of these horrific stories. Like, we worked with the family who they were in a car accident. Their car lit on fire. And every single member of that family had gotten third-degree burns, right? Severely burned, all in the burn unit up at the University of Utah, and 2 of the members had died. You look at the murder-suicides that we've seen that have happened in places like Enoch, the one that happened in West Valley, where there's a lone child now who is the only survivor of that event. And think about what that young man's experience is going to be if he doesn't get really supportive wraparound services to help him navigate that, right? So that's why this matters. And again, even though grief, like I've talked, is part of this experience, when it happens at a younger age, it can be much more difficult to process. I mean, I'm up here sweating like a whore in church, but that's perimenopause. I got so much respect for my teenage kids again. Like, come on, where are my perimenopause women? Right? Aren't you just like, I'm ready to strip down because I'm dying. But I mean, like, it gives me so much respect for teenagers again. Remember when you were like 12, 13, and all of a sudden the hormone thing started happening? Dudes, this was for you too. Some things ain't dropped, some did, right? And like, you had all these things you weren't sure what to do with because we didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about it. The teen brain is still developing. Remember, substance use begins to happen typically at what age? Age 11. Most mental health conditions have their first onset of a little disease track around age 11. What else is happening in your body around age 11? Again, perimenopause, I've had days I thought I was losing my mind. Rage, anger, again, hormones. Hormones. But we didn't talk about it. We still don't talk enough about it. But recognizing that they're trying to develop critical thinking skills and coping strategies while also processing something as intense as grief. Again, this is an opportunity for us to do more. So I mentioned to you that with funding through USBE and Caring Connections, we've developed the first ever model for teen grief. So again, we're starting to implement some of those trainings. We know, again, that we cannot take away the pain, but my goodness, if we can show up and support, we can alter the way people move forward and kind of change that trajectory. And like we've all talked already today, that even when grief does kind of start to chill a little bit, it's still there, right? It's still there. So I want to highlight just a couple of things that our teens experience with grief. This is a reaction we see a lot of grieving kids adopt. The need to be overly responsible. How many of you have worked with these kids? Right? And guys, we see this, especially in single parent homes, where kids now are being asked to do chores and different things that maybe were the role of the parent who is no longer here, that they're stepping in, filling in. I worked with a grieving mom yesterday whose 48-year-old son, after the loss of her spouse, shows up 3 days a week to make sure she can get to the store. She can, and he's a grown guy, but he's still her kid. He's taken on a role of responsibility that really isn't his, but he's doing it. Like I mentioned, we see that kind of taking on the new role. There's a lot of this. You guys remember working in, who's done child development stuff here? Remember that as little kids, that's kind of their first thing, that's this person-centered world, everything's about me. So they attribute anything that goes wrong as it's something I did, it's my fault. How many of us are still doing that as adults because we never learned how to get out of that kind of attachment, challenge? A lot of kids will explain to you that they have this severe anxiety, and they don't do it by saying, I feel anxious. It's my stomach hurts. I have diarrhea. I throw up, right? I have a pit in my chest. I have a heaviness. It feels like I can't breathe. One of the teens I worked with says, it feels like I have an elephant sitting on me. That's how heavy it feels. Definitely loss of appetite. We see this a lot with grieving people. Again, because kids, teens especially, want to identify with their peers, they also tend to do this with the people they've lost. They want to identify in ways that keep that person here. So we've seen this in things like mannerisms, wearing the person's clothing. I'm a great example. Tattoos everywhere. You better believe I've memorialized every experience and every person I've lost in some form of ink on my body. And that's okay, right? But we know that these are some common things. Some other stuff to remember is, again, because teens don't necessarily have some of the life experience that we do, they're going to struggle more with real big feelings of anger. And again, that feeling of guilt, unexpected outbursts, restlessness. This is a big one, especially with little kids. They don't understand the finality of death. Do y'all remember when The Walking Dead came on as a show? Remember that? Zombies that came back? We had talked about this years ago in our work with suicide, especially with young people. Maybe not understanding the finality their actions would have. Again, go back to me as the teen, the doctor that said, oh, you didn't even do it right. Be glad for that. Because we've seen attempts as young as 5. I worked with a family who lost a 10-year-old. I'm here to tell you that 10-year-old did not think what he did was going to kill him. Right? He didn't understand that action. He didn't understand that action. So this is a common one we see. Again, they might see or hear things. What's that movie with little Haley Joel Osment? Daddy, the people are talking to me, right? I see things. Sixth Sense. I'm a believer. We got to be careful. But remember, seeing and hearing things is also an indicator to us that psychosis or something like that could be happening. So we need to take those things seriously and check in. This is a common one. They love to be able to still communicate with that person. I'm realizing the more I talk that I'm still a real repressed teen. I made a flat Jill. I made a cardboard cutout of my mother. She rides in the car with me. I've taken her to graduations. I wanted her to be present at things that her grandkids were doing that she couldn't be there for. That might seem weird. Now that I think about it, I don't care. She sits in my bedroom, so sometimes when my husband and I are about to, I'm like, let me turn Jill around. Just make sure she ain't watching. Oh, that's funny. So yeah, I do that. In our work, we actually modeled a lot of our grief work from this Hogan inventory of bereavement for kids and teens. And what I loved about this, and again, you can just Google Hogan and Hogan inventory, is what they recognize is that, well, yes, there's a lot of these kind of poor grief outcomes and really intense grieving experiences kids will have because they're kids. And because they're learning and growing and adapting, their opportunity for resilience and personal growth is greater the younger they are. Because they have more life ahead of them. Think about that. How many of you, again, intense loss experiences as a young person? Didn't that help you develop more empathy, more kindness? When we lose somebody close to us, we know life is short. So again, the things we thought mattered don't. My boss used to tell this story, my boss from a previous job, about the day on 9/11. On 9/11, when those planes hit the towers, people on those airplanes made a call, didn't they? Remember, we heard stories about that. Who did they call? People they loved. And what did they say? I love you. They weren't calling it to be like, you dick, you did this to me and I'm so mad, right? It wasn't that. They didn't call it to hash it out one more time. It was, I love you. Life is short. We don't take our days for granted when we've been impacted by some of this stuff. You know, I love in recovery in the program that I got sober and taught me the 24-hour a day, that all I got is today, and living in the now is where I have power, and that's true for lots of things, right? And so again, taking care of what I need to in this day is a tool that I've brought forward. I don't carry yesterday's crap. If I have a fight, I try to resolve it, because the one thing I will never forget, and I know we're getting close to lunch, but you still gotta hang with me for 15 more minutes. My oldest brother is a Marine, Semper Fi. He's been a State Department employee, currently works at the Pentagon. So he has security clearance. So needless to say, when he had to do his security clearances applications, I'd always be like, well, okay, tell him I'm sorry. Because they do, they have to do background checks on all your family members, okay? It's loads of fun. But my dad, in the depths of his addiction, took my brother's social security number and opened up credit cards, bank accounts, cell phone accounts, and really caused my brother a lot of harm. My brother would have had to file disputes and take my dad to court in order for those things to go off. And of course, that was his dad. He didn't want to, but he was angry. We tried to do an intervention with my dad, his 5 kids, not having a clue what we were doing, only my intervention TV watching skills. And y'all, I hate to say it, you know, but something my brother has been haunted with is the last words my brother ever said to my father were, "I could kill you with my bare hands. You have made my life so incredibly hard." Now, are those the reasons? Is that what made my dad kill himself? No. No. And my dad knew my brother loved him. But I've watched my Marine compartmentalize all your feelings, carry that around for 23 years and never be able to forgive himself. And that's what we mean when we say this life is short, right? And that we have options and that we can move through and grow. I love this quote, Fred Rogers, you know, give it up for Mr. Rogers. Also a Marine, full sleeves, that's the rumor, right? I hope it's true. I hope it's true. Remember, he always, though, he's attributed to the story that his mom said, look for the helpers, because you'll always find them. I love this quote, we live in a world in which we need to share responsibility, especially with youth. It's easy to say, not my kid, not my community. Talking about our trans youth right now, that has been way too easy for some of us to say. They are our kids and they are our community, and we have to stand up and support them. Don't make it political, it shouldn't be, they're human beings. Sorry, end of story. But then there are those who see the need and respond. And those are my heroes. And I'm looking at a room of them right now. Again, I'm betting you're not in here because you're making lots of money doing what you're doing. Took a $45,000 a year pay cut when I left AFSP to be a social worker. I owe more in student debt than I make in a year. And I don't care. Because it ain't about the money, right? We're here because we care. And thank God for people like you. Now in grief literacy, we talk a lot, you know, we've touched on this already today. You know, when people say things that are hurtful, again, it's not because they're trying to be, they just don't know any other way. How many of you have heard this term, compassion? So this was derived from a Latin word that actually means co-suffering. Remember the movie, The Passion of the Christ? The reason it was called The Passion of the Christ is it means the suffering of Christ. It's a Latin word. Co-suffering means I come in. It's a sympathetic consciousness of somebody else's distress and a desire to try to help or want to alleviate it. Being in this room, I know that you witness a lot of the heartache that happens in our world. You witness these broken people, and yet you're there sitting because you want to elevate hope and bring it back to them. You want to help them to be a part of this life still. We participate. That's what it means to witness. We absorb the experience, right? I don't have time today to give you the self-care talk, but I would. But if you've ever experienced compassion fatigue, you're doing a good job. That means you care enough that you're soul tired, and I'm stoked that you get to hear from somebody who's going to help you look at your soul and what you can do to replenish your soul. We also have to be careful because sometimes when we witness things, we take responsibility. Again, it's not our story, it's theirs, but I'm still a part of this. And to witness is also that ability to bring that story out in the future and show up. So let's spend our last little bit of time together talking about the things we can do that are helpful, okay? What helps? It says up here, patient, a virtue I don't possess. Where are my people? Oh, yay, good. I don't. God gives me so many opportunities to work on it. I haven't figured it out yet, but I'm going to keep at it. But patient listening and re-listening. When a griever is in front of you, let them tell their story. Our first week of group, we say, tell us the story of the death. What happened? By the end, we are telling the story of the life and who their person was that they lost. And we hear it over and over and over and over again. Amanda, how many times did you have to tell the story of your husband dying in those first few days and weeks? 100 times, right? And we need those people who will listen to it 100 times and not be frustrated and mad, but just say, yep, I can hear it again. Again, letting them tell that death story always gets them to telling the story of the life. You just got to be present enough to wait for it. Giving them comforts and kindness. I don't give flowers when people have deaths. Flowers die. Why do I need another reminder that things die? You know what's helpful? Grief groceries. Grief gift cards for DoorDash. Because ain't nobody wants to cook. Right? That's what we're talking about. Reassuring the person, you help build their confidence that they can do this. Gosh, I had so many conversations with my sister-in-law after her son died, and she just said, I can't. And I kept saying, yes, you can, and you want to know why? Because you don't have to do it alone. Look in this room right now. Here is your mother. Here are your 3 sisters. Here's me. Here's your nieces. Here's your nephews. We're here. You don't have to do it by yourself. That's how I know you're going to be able to get through this. And again, if we recognize they're struggling, let's get them help. What isn't helpful? The first one says, telling them your grief story. Again, in that moment. Can you share things like, I kind of get where you're going. I had a similar. Come on, how many of us have had that person? Oh, I know exactly how you felt. You like got a really big itch, and you're like, I'm sure you do know exactly how I feel. Remember, that's minimizing. Because even if we have similar experiences, they're still unique. Because grievers are unique. Because we as humans are unique. This premature spiritual support. Come on, if I had a nickel for every time somebody said, well, at least she's out of pain. Oh, at least they're in a better place. Anytime they start with at least, shut them down. Shut them down. Not helpful. We know that grievers may get to that place on their own. But y'all, how many of you had experiences, even if you were deeply spiritual or faithful, religious, where you were angry at maybe your God or your higher power because how could this happen? We have to allow room for all of that. Medication, the least helpful thing when people are grieving, and sadly the first thing we see people go to Because in those first days and weeks, tell me about sleep. It's evasive. But again, what we tell grievers, it will come when your brain is ready. Remember, they have been through an immense amount of trauma and shock. That's why they can't sleep. But sleep medications don't allow for that deep REM sleep. And that's actually where the brain does the most work and healing as it relates to grief. And sadly, the most common sleep medication people use after a loss starts with an A and ends with an L. It's available in your little liquor store or in gas stations. Right? Alcohol. Alcohol. Alcohol is also a depressant. Can invoke feelings of sadness. Strange. Again, it's just not helpful. And it's hard conversations, but we have these conversations with grievers. Now is not the time to be drinking. Now is not the time to be taking the Ambien or the over-the-counter sleep med. Like, again, I get that it's hard, but when your body is ready, it will sleep. And then this is my favorite one. Assuming there is just one way to grieve, right? Again, we know it's all over the place. So I always revisit the voids, and it says, anything that minimizes a person's experience or begins with at least. My friends in the room have suffered a miscarriage or a pregnancy loss, right? You heard, well, at least you can get pregnant, at least you can have another. I've heard people who've lost children, right? Well, you have other kids, at least. Remember, those kinds of things just aren't helpful. Focusing on the circumstances of the death, not helpful. The how did he do it? The gossip mill that runs rampant when it is some of these stigmatized deaths, not helpful. And as we mentioned earlier, that premature, or spiritual advice that they're just not ready for. And so what is? I love that we talk about this, and in our work we say that it's so vital for us, anytime we're going to enter the room of suffering with our grievers, that we do a little self-check first and just say, okay, where am I today? I facilitated a support group our last session that had 4 ladies who'd also lost their moms, 3 that had also lost mom and dad. So I always had to go, okay, remember, this is not you. This is not your grief story. This is you taking care of you so you can show up and be present for them. And again, if I'm not in that space, that's where I say, I'm not the best person to give that support and co-suffering right now, because maybe it would be hurtful to me and I wouldn't be as helpful. Make sense? So that's important. Again, the listening. I love this one, the practicalities, For a lot of our people, especially those who've lost a spouse, they say some of the things that were the hardest in those first weeks was I had to find the bank accounts. I had to figure out his password, right? I had to know where the money was. I had to know all these things. That's why we also talk to our grievers about how important it is that they create a plan. If you haven't written a living will, if you haven't done your end-of-life stuff, do it. I know none of us want to think about that, but my goodness, it makes it so much easier on your people that you've left behind when they know what to do, when they know what your wishes are. So those are things we talk about. And just the last couple minutes, this slide I love. It says, the more people are anchored in communities where they feel connected, protected, and respected, the more people are ready to reach out and experiment. The less they feel connected, protected, and respected, the more they'll want to build walls to protect themselves from change. And this all comes from Thomas Friedman. He wrote a beautiful book. And again, this is what it looks like for us to help create those communities. That's what a grief literate community is. It says, I'm here for you. I respect your experience and you're safe here. And I want to give you that help. Therese Rando, what a beautiful reminder. Right? I can't take away their pain, so don't even try. And honestly, as a helper, that's a relief. If you know that you don't have to take it away from them, that you just got to sit there and be present, that's the easy part. It really is. We talk about that in suicide prevention all the time, that willingness to just, again, sit in the dark. We have to get rid of these myths. Nobody grieves the same. One day does not predict the next. How many of you learned that the hard way, right? And there's no magic words, so don't try to come up with them. Instead, come alongside. So who needs our support in the presence of loss? The people we started with this morning. I've told way too many stories, which means I have a few more slides, but I'm not going to get to them. But what I want to leave you with is this, and then I'll put up the slide that has our contact information at the end. Actually, close your eyes, because then you won't get sick if I do this real quick. Close your eyes. I told you to close your eyes. Okay, if you're on Instagram, that's a great QR code that takes you to our Grief Literacy Instagram account, where you can find a plethora of useful information to share with folks about grief and what it's like to support grievers. On our website, we also created vignettes. We have a master class in grief literacy that's all of 25 minutes that our director does. So you could pull that up easily in a staff meeting and share it with your folks to help them learn how to be, better equipped. Or better yet, come attend one of our full-day trainings. I'm teaching the next overdose or loss to substance use support group training the end of April 29th. You get CEs, it's on Zoom. I don't care if you have your camera on, you can be on your couch in your sweats, hanging out, we'll have fun, okay? But what I want to leave you with is this. Years ago, in our work with AFSP, we would do these survivor boxes. And it was a box of resources, poems, self-care stuff that we could take to a family that just said, you know what, again, in a week or so when everybody's gone home, when you're not sure what the hell to do next, open this up. And there was a poem we used to put in there called The Shipwreck of Grief. We've yet to be able to find who actually wrote that poem, but you can Google it. You'll find it word for word on Reddit. But I'm going to read it to you in my memory and my version. So there's a little old man who sits on the shore, and he encounters a griever. He says, "Come sit with me a while, I have something to tell you." When grief hits, the waves at first are massive. They're 100 feet tall and they're coming every 3 seconds. You'll barely have time to get your head above water before the next one will hit and pull you under again. But after a while, you'll notice the waves start to get smaller. They're a little bit further apart, but the waves will always come. Trust me, he says. Take it from an old guy. You'll want them to come, because that's when you'll remember the love that you shared. In our life, there will be many shipwrecks. There will be many waves. And if we're fortunate enough to experience them, that is a life well lived. Thank you so much for your time today. Lunch is here. Hopefully it's lots of carbs. Close your eyes again. Close your eyes again. I'll leave that. Oh, here we go. This is the one. Maybe? Go. Oh, maybe not. There it is. There's our contact info. Thanks, friends.
Thank you, Karen. I'm going to leave this up while everybody takes their pictures and gets contact information. I wanted to say thank you all for being here. I know that was a heavier topic. If anybody needs to take a break, it's okay to excuse